Imagine standing in a field that your family has plowed for like 3 generations.
Right.
The soil is turned, the crops are nearly ready to harvest, and literally your entire yearly income is tied up in those green shoots right in front of you.
And then everything changes in an afternoon.
Exactly. Because then you hear the low rumble of heavy diesel engines cresting the hill. Government bulldozers just roll straight through your property, crushing that ready-to-harvest crop into the dirt.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And the craziest part, the law? A law written before you or your parents were even born says you aren't owed a single rupee for the food they just destroyed. Well, welcome to the reality of the Dr. Shivaram Karanth layout.
I mean, the contrast between the agrarian history of this land and the mechanical nature of urban expansion, it's just staggering. We're looking at a situation where the legal framework governing human lives completely fails to account for the human cost of displacement.
It totally fails. And that is the foundation of this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're speaking directly to you, the listener, because you are a farmer, you're a landowner.
You're someone whose ancestral land, your livelihood, your whole generational safety net is caught squarely in the massive, nearly 2-decade-long acquisition sweep of this layout in North Bengaluru.
Right. Your world has been turned upside down.
Yeah.
And the rules of the game, I mean, they seem to change depending on which court issued a ruling on any given Tuesday.
Navigating this, it's not just about understanding real estate, it's about survival. I mean, the layout spans over 3,300 acres.
That is massive.
It is a behemoth of an urban planning scheme. It spreads across 16, and in some official documents, they actually say 17 distinct revenue villages.
Places that are deeply familiar to the people living there, right? Like Ramagandanahalli, Somashetihalli, Virasagara, Avalali, Bayalakar.
Exactly. And our mission today is highly specific, and it's entirely for your benefit, the listener. You need to know exactly how to navigate this bureaucratic maze.
A maze that was seemingly designed to be totally impenetrable, by the way.
Without a doubt. You need to know how to secure the land compensation you're rightfully owed. And crucially, you have to understand how to protect whatever remaining assets you have.
Yeah, whether that's a built house or a promised plot of land, you have to keep it from being swallowed by arbitrary government fees or, environmental red tape.
Right. So to give you the most accurate, actionable roadmap, we've synthesized a mountain of complex source material for this deep dive.
Oh yeah, we went deep. We are unpacking decades of dense, often totally contradictory legal judgments.
We have direct orders from the Supreme Court of India and the Karnataka High Court. We're also integrating vital, on-the-ground reporting from Land Conflict Watch.
Plus poring over official notifications to the Bangalore Development Authority, the BDA.
And we're analyzing real-time real estate market data from 2025 all the way through mid-2026.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just a story about dirt and asphalt and concrete. It is a story about your fundamental rights being tested by rapid, basically unstoppable urban expansion.
North Bengaluru is booming. The airport has changed the economic gravity of the entire region, and you are sitting right on the fault line.
What's fascinating here is that the Dr. Shivaram Karanth layout isn't merely another city expansion project. It is arguably the most contested urban planning scheme in the entire history of the BDA.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a literal and legal battleground. I mean, policy shifts, judicial intervention, actual physical confrontations with bulldozers, that is its legacy.
And understanding this chaotic past is literally the only mathematical and legal way you can protect your financial future today.
Right. So we had to start at the genesis. We need to go back to the timeline of turmoil, which kicked off in December 2008.
2008, wow.
Yeah, that's when the BDA issued what is called a preliminary notification to acquire 3,546 acres and 12 guntas of land across those 17 villages in the Yelahanka Hubli.
Let's pause and define those terms for anyone trying to grasp the scale. So a hubli is essentially a cluster of adjoining villages administered together for tax and land revenue purposes, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about a massive, unified geographic footprint.
And 12 guntas. A gunta is, what, 1/40th of an acre? So roughly 1,089 square feet.
Yep. And for a small farmer, a few guntas isn't just a rounding error. It's the space where your cattle graze, or where a vital secondary crop grows to feed your family during the dry season.
The plan was to swallow all of this to form almost 19,000 residential sites.
19,000. And the initial reaction from the ground, it wasn't just frustration. It was an organized, immediate, and massive resistance.
Right, because over 12,000 to 15,000 formal objections were filed by landowners.
To put that in perspective, processing that volume of legal paperwork would paralyze a modern tech company today, let alone a municipal authority back in 2008.
And the core of that anger made perfect economic sense. I mean, the compensation rates being offered by the BDA were tied to historical, deeply outdated agricultural guidance values.
Right, because the farmers weren't blind. You all could see what was happening just a few kilometers away.
Exactly. The Kempegowda International Airport had recently opened, and it was driving local real estate prices into the stratosphere.
Investors were circling. And here was the government essentially offering pennies on the dollar for prime real estate, legally forcing you to sell at a massive loss.
That valuation gap is the original sin of this entire project. It bred this immediate, unshakable distrust between the citizens and the state.
And the situation rapidly deteriorated, like from a debate over fair market value into something highly suspicious.
Very suspicious.
Between 2008 and 2014, successive state governments, meaning both major political parties, the BJP and the Congress, they began to quietly issue what are known as denotifications.
This is where the story gets incredibly dark for the average landowner. The government allegedly dropped over 700 acres of land from the acquisition plan.
And the sources highlight a very specific chunk of 257.2 acres that was suddenly just miraculously excluded from the layout.
And, shocker, this land allegedly belonged to politically connected individuals, VIPs, and major real estate developers.
So the small farmer is sitting there watching their 1 acre of vital grazing land get swallowed up by the BDA, while a wealthy developer right next door gets a free pass to build private villas.
It's sickening. The blatant inequality of that process sparked years of relentless legal ping pong. I mean, citizens sued, activists sued.
And by 2015, the Karnataka High Court looked at the absolute mess this project had become. They reviewed the endless delays, the thousands of unheard objections, and those highly questionable denotifications, and they took a really drastic step.
Yeah, they actually crushed the entire preliminary notification. They effectively canceled the Dr. Shivaram Karanth layout.
I try to imagine the sheer relief sweeping through those 17 villages in 2015.
Oh, families probably celebrated. They probably thought, okay, we fought the machine and won. It's over. We saved our ancestral land.
But the tragedy is that this sense of security prompted many people to start building homes on that land. They believed the threat of acquisition was permanently gone.
Right. But the BDA appealed the High Court's decision. And in August 2018, a 2-judge bench of the Supreme Court of India dropped a hammer that just shattered the status quo.
The Supreme Court completely set aside the High Court's order. They revived the project from the dead, and they ordered the BDA to proceed with the acquisition immediately.
But here is the critical, devastating part of that 2018 ruling. The Supreme Court explicitly ignored and invalidated all those previous denotifications and the no objection certificates, the NOCs, that the BDA and state officials had been handing out to landowners.
Yeah, the judicial logic here is strict, and to a layperson, it can seem incredibly unfair.
Wait, I have to push back on this on behalf of the listener. If the government itself, the actual recognized authority in charge of land and revenue, issues a formal piece of paper, an NOC, stating your land is safe, how can the Supreme Court just erase that?
It's a great question.
Doesn't that shatter the fundamental social contract?
Yeah.
Like, if a citizen cannot trust a signed, stamped document from their own government, what is the basis of law?
Well, it exposes the brutal reality of administrative law versus statutory law.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So the BDA operates under a very strict statutory framework, specifically the BDA Act of 1976. Under this law, the process for acquiring land, or conversely, dropping land from an acquisition plan, is highly formalized.
Right, there are steps.
Exactly. It requires official, public, gazetted notifications. It has to be debated, published, and entered into the permanent legal record.
So a politician can't just sign a letter in their office and hand it to a friend.
Exactly the problem. What was happening between 2008 and 2014 was that politicians, middlemen, and rogue officials were giving out informal or administrative clearances.
It's bypassing the whole system.
Yeah, they were signing pieces of paper that had no basis in the formalized BDA Act. So the Supreme Court looked at this avalanche of paperwork and ruled that administrative exclusions granted outside the official gazetted process have absolutely zero legal standing.
They were void from the moment they were signed.
Exactly.
Let's ground this in reality. A farmer might have been terrified of losing their land. A middleman approaches them and says, hey, pay me a fee, and I know a guy who can get you an NOC.
Which happened a lot.
Right. So the farmer pays their life savings, gets this official-looking certificate, builds a house for their children thinking they're totally safe. And then in 2018, the Supreme Court just says, nope, That paper is worthless. Your house is illegal.
It's devastating. But the scale of these irregularities is what forced the Supreme Court to take such an aggressive stance. The sources cite a very illuminating case from 2010.
Oh, the 72-hour one.
Yes. An applicant sought to denotify a parcel of land measuring 3 acres and 6 guntas in Avalahalli village.
Okay, 3 acres and 6 guntas. That's a substantial piece of property.
It is. They applied for the denotification, and the BDA issued a no-objection certificate endorsing that the land was excluded from the layout in exactly 72 hours.
72 hours. Anyone who has ever tried to get a simple driver's license renewed or a property tax receipt updated knows that for a government bureaucracy to move on a massive land deal in 72 hours is statistically impossible.
It's unheard of.
That usually takes months of file movements across, like, 5 different departments.
The unprecedented speed was a massive red flag. The land acquisition officer involved in that specific 72-hour turnaround was later investigated in a related illegal land denotification case.
So it exposed a rampant systemic racket.
Exactly. The Supreme Court realized the entire acquisition process had been hijacked by corruption. So their solution was to freeze everything, erase all the NOCs, force the project back to its original 2008 footprint, and mandate that any exemptions had to be decided by the courts, not by local politicians.
So the Supreme Court's 2018 revival of the project didn't just restart the bulldozers. It locked in a very specific set of laws. It essentially trapped the layout and every farmer living inside it in a legal time capsule.
Yeah, and the consequence of freezing the project to its 2008 origins is that the Supreme Court inadvertently stripped the landowners of modern, humane, legal protections.
Let's dig into that, because it explains the core of why you, the listener, aren't getting the compensation you expected. If you've been following the news or attending the protests, you know that farmers and Dalit organizations like the Dalit Sahar Samiti, operating in Mavalapura, have been fiercely protesting.
They've been out in the streets for years.
Yes, demanding that their compensation be calculated under the LAR Act of 2013.
For context, that is the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation, and Resettlement Act.
Right, it's a piece of progressive, modern legislation. It was designed specifically to protect marginalized people in your exact situation from state overreach.
But the Supreme Court explicitly ruled that the 2013 LAR Act does not apply to the Dr. Shivaram Karanth layout.
Which is wild. Instead, your land is being acquired under the authority of the BDA Act of 1976. And here's the kicker. The BDA Act incorporates the ancient colonial-era Land Acquisition Act of 1894.
This specific legal mechanism is it's one of the most critical loopholes you need to understand because it dictates the harsh financial reality you face today. The concept is called legislation by incorporation.
How does that work in practice? Why are citizens in a modern democracy being governed by a law written in 1894?
Okay, so when the Karnataka state legislature drafted the BDA Act back in 1976, they didn't want to spend years writing complex, new procedural rules for how to physically buy and acquire land.
It's tedious work.
Right, so as a shortcut, they simply pointed to the existing federal law, the 1894 Act, and legally incorporated its provisions into the new BDA Act.
So it's basically like the BDA Act of 1976 took a photograph of the 1894 law, they glued that photograph into their own rule book and said, just do whatever the photograph says.
That is a perfect analogy. But legally, once those 1894 rules were incorporated into the 1976 BDA Act, they became an independent, permanent part of the BDA Act.
Got it.
So fast forward to 2013. The Indian Parliament recognizes that the 1894 Act is draconian, unfair, and entirely focused on the government's power of eminent domain rather than citizen rights.
So Parliament completely repeals the 1894 Act and replaces it with the much better 2013 LAR Act.
Exactly. But because the BDA Act was relying on that photograph, the courts ruled that the 1976 BDA Act was completely unaffected by Parliament's decision to destroy the original 1894 subject.
The photograph never changes.
The Supreme Court maintained that the BDA Act is a self-contained code. The repeal of the General 1894 Act does not alter the specific provisions frozen inside the BDA Act. Therefore, you are governed by the rules as they existed over a century ago.
That is incredibly frustrating, bordering on dystopian. Let's analyze the real-world impact of this legal technicality on you, the listener. If you were protected by the 2013 LAR Act, you wouldn't just be getting a raw real estate transaction.
No, the law demands comprehensive rehabilitation. You would get resettlement support.
If you're a landless agricultural laborer who relies on common grazing lands to feed a few cows, the 2013 Act mandates compensation for the loss of that communal livelihood. If the government destroys your crops, you get paid for the crop loss.
The 2013 framework recognizes the holistic human cost of displacement. It really attempts to put the displaced family in a position equal to or better than they were before the acquisition.
But under the 1894 framework trapped inside the BDA Act, all of that humanity is stripped away. It is a cold, hard mathematical calculation. Land for land. That's it.
Just land for land.
And the physical toll of this cold calculation has been devastating to witness. The sources detail exactly what happened in February of 2023. The BDA, backed by the supreme authority of the court order, arrived at villages like Shamarajapura with heavy machinery.
And they didn't just clear empty, barren fields.
No. They raised ready-to-harvest food crops. They destroyed vital fodder intended to feed livestock through the dry season. They crushed established fruit plantations that took years to mature.
The despair reported from the ground is profound. One farmer noted that their entire livelihood, the financial engine for their family for the whole year, was wiped out in a single afternoon.
And because the 2013 LIRR Act doesn't apply, there is zero legal mechanism for them to file a claim for those specific destroyed crops. The BDA only recognizes the dirt, not what grows out of it.
And when the farmers naturally protested this destruction, when they stood in front of the bulldozers to protect their food, the response of the state was severe.
In that February 2023 incident, 9 farmers were arrested by the local police. They were charged under serious Indian Penal Code sections. We are talking about Section 143 for unlawful assembly and Section 353 for assault or criminal force to deter a public servant from discharge of his duty.
The legal aftermath of those arrests highlights the immense systemic pressure being placed on the community to comply. The farmers were eventually granted bail, but the conditions were incredibly punitive.
Yeah, bail was set at $50,000 each, which is a massive sum for a farmer whose primary income was just destroyed by a bulldozer.
It really is. And the judge attached a condition that feels like a direct violation of democratic rights. To get out of jail, they were legally banned from participating in any protests against the layout for a full year.
They had to sign restrictive bonds and were forced to present themselves to the police station on a regular basis.
The message from the authorities was clear. Resistance will not only cost you your land, it will cost you your liberty. And the collateral damage extends deep into the agrarian ecosystem.
Right. The sources note that in the aftermath of those bulldozers leveling the area, an estimated 3,000 cattle were left completely without fodder because the common grazing lands were destroyed.
3,000 animals facing starvation.
The farmers pleaded with the BDA and the state government just to provide emergency cattle feed, a basic humanitarian request. But there was no response. The BDA is building a city. They are not in the business of animal husbandry.
This bleak reality created an unavoidable crisis for the Supreme Court. They had ordered the layout to proceed, but they couldn't ignore the physical truth on the ground.
Which was that there were literally thousands of people living in fully built houses, apartments, and commercial structures on this contested land.
Exactly. Many of these structures were built during that 10-year window when the High Court had canceled the project, or when people held those later invalidated NOCs.
The Supreme Court couldn't just order the mass demolition of thousands of family homes. You would be talking about a breakdown of civil order, a humanitarian disaster of tens of thousands of newly homeless people in the streets of Bengaluru. They had to invent a solution.
Because the statutory law was so rigid, the judiciary had to create a bespoke, custom-built mechanism to handle the specific grievances of the Shivaram Karanth layout. They created specialized committees.
If you are listening to this right now, these committees are the most important bodies in your life. They hold the absolute keys to your property and your future. So let's break down how they function.
The first of these authorities was the Justice A.V. Chandrasekhar Committee, established by the Supreme Court in December 2020. This was a high-powered 3-member panel.
Headed by a former High Court judge, right?
Yeah, alongside a former BDA commissioner who understood the bureaucracy and a former Director General of Police who understood enforcement.
Their mandate was incredibly specific. They were tasked with identifying and saving lawful constructions that were built between the initial 2008 notification and the Supreme Court's revival judgment on August 3, 2018.
They were basically looking for the innocent buyers, the people who poured their life savings into a home during that 10-year window of legal chaos.
And the committee did not rely merely on paperwork. They utilized satellite imaging, historical aerial surveys, and rigorous physical ground inspections to verify claims.
Over its tenure, the Chandrasekhar Committee submitted 30 detailed reports to the Supreme Court, and their impact was massive. They successfully regularized 4,690 properties.
They literally saved thousands of homes from the wrecking ball.
But that committee eventually wrapped up its core mandate. It processed the bulk of those specific 2008 to 2018 claims and was dissolved by the High Court, which brings us to the current authority.
Right, the body you will most likely interact with today, the Bopaya Committee.
Following the dissolution of the Chandrasekhar panel, the High Court transferred all the remaining unresolved grievances, particularly those of revenue side holders and complex individual claims, to this new committee made up of retired district judges.
Here is where the legal reality gets incredibly sharp. You cannot just walk up to the Bopaya Committee, slam your property deed on the desk, and demand your alternative plot or a regularization certificate. There is a massive legal catch designed to protect the BDA.
The critical prerequisite to even applying to the Bopaya Committee is surrender.
Surrender.
Yes. You must unconditionally withdraw any active lawsuits, writ petitions, or legal challenges you have filed in any court challenging the BDA's underlying right to acquire your land.
Let me make sure I fully grasp this. It's essentially a state-mandated plea deal.
That's a good way to put it.
The government is telling the farmer, drop your resistance, lay down your sword, stop fighting the existence of the layout in court.
Yeah.
And in exchange, the BDA promises to let you sit at the table, and they will evaluate your claim for a replacement plot or regularization. But you have to give up your fundamental right to fight the acquisition first.
The courts view it as a necessary compromise. Indian courts are notoriously backlogged. If 10,000 farmers individually sue the BDA, the layout will be tied up in litigation until the year 2050.
Yeah, nothing gets built, the state loses billions, and the urban housing crisis worsens.
So the judiciary offers this trade. Surrender your protracted litigation, and we will process your compensation through this dedicated, fast-tracked committee system.
But even if you surrender your lawsuit, victory at the committee is far from guaranteed. The evidentiary requirements to actually win your case and get your building regularized are incredibly strict.
We can look at what the previous Chandrasekhar Committee actively rejected to understand the standard you're up against today.
Yeah, the documentation reveals some stark examples of how rigorous the verification process is.
Take the case of the Ananya Public School. The owners applied for an exemption from demolition, arguing they were a vital educational institution serving the local community.
On paper, that sounds great. You don't want to bulldoze a school.
But the committee didn't just look at the paper. Their inspection and audit revealed the school had 0 active students enrolled for years.
Wait, really? 0?
0. It was essentially an empty building. Suddenly, in the 2023 academic year, as the bulldozers drew closer, the school miraculously enrolled exactly 1 student.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the committee saw right through the ruse. They realized the educational institution status was just a shield to prevent demolition, and they rejected the exemption outright.
It shows you cannot trick this process with superficial paperwork. And what about residential buildings? What if a developer or a collective of landowners built a massive multi-story apartment building on a revenue site? If the committee decides it can't be regularized, do they just hand the owner a 30 by 40 empty dirt lot in exchange for a 5-story concrete building?
The rejection of high-rises is a particularly painful area of this dispute. The committee rejected major multi-story residential projects, specifically naming buildings like Shashank Florento and Max Madhura.
And what was the reason?
The primary reason for rejection was that they lacked the required occupancy certificates from the BBMP, the Bruhat Bengaluru Mahanagara Palik, which is the city's main civic administrative body.
So even if the building physically exists and is structurally sound, if it didn't have the exact municipal sign-offs at the time it was constructed prior to August 2018, it's deemed unlawful.
Precisely the standard.
Yep.
To get regularization, your building had to be lawful according to the specific local panchayat or municipal rules that applied at the moment the foundation was poured.
And if you don't meet those strict criteria, or, and this is a nightmare scenario, if your perfectly legal, regularized building happens to sit directly in the middle of where the BDA has planned a new 100-foot arterial road, your house is still coming down.
Because the BDA's overriding policy for structures in the way of civil works is land-for-land compensation.
The committee notes state explicitly that if your building is demolished to align a layout road, you do not receive the cash value of the bricks, the mortar, the plumbing, or the labor that went into building it.
Right. Because under those archaic 1894 rules we discussed earlier, unregularized or obstructing structures on acquired land do not merit independent financial compensation.
However, because you own the underlying dirt, the committee will try to allot you an equivalent extent of developed land as physically close to your existing property as possible.
It is a harsh reset button. You lose the generational family home and you start completely over with an empty patch of dirt.
Which transitions us to the most vital math equation you will ever need to understand. If you successfully navigate the Bopaya Committee, or if you are a traditional farmer who is surrendering raw, unbuilt agricultural land, we need to look at exactly what the government is handing you in return. We need to dissect the farmer's share.
The entire economic model of the Dr. Shivaram Karanth layout, like most modern BDA projects, operates on what is called a 60.4Z formula.
Let's do the math on this together so the listener knows exactly what they are entitled to.
Okay, so when the BDA acquires a massive parcel of raw, undeveloped land, they first deduct 45% of that total area purely for civic amenities.
Right. This includes the physical space required for paved roads, public parks, playgrounds, massive stormwater drains, electrical substations, and sewage treatment infrastructure.
So almost half the land practically vanishes from the ledger immediately just to make the urban layout livable.
That leaves 55% of the total acquired land available to be carved into actual, sellable residential plots.
Now, out of that remaining 55% residential area, the original farmers who surrendered the land get 40% back in the form of fully developed, clear title plots.
And the BDA retains the remaining 60% of the residential land to allot to the general public or sell via e-auction.
Right, so let's put real numbers to this for a listener standing in their field.
Let's say you own exactly 1 acre of land. For reference, 1 acre is 43,560 square feet.
You surrender that entire acre to the BDA. According to the 60.4U formula applied to the 55% residential footprint, you are legally entitled to receive approximately 9,555 to 9,583 square feet of fully developed plots in return.
The visual of that trade-off is stark. You give up 43,560 square feet of raw farm dirt, a space large enough to sustain crops and cattle, and you get back roughly 9,500 square feet of prime, asphalt road-connected, water-piped urban real estate.
But the farmers, however, are absolutely not satisfied with this ratio. They are actively protesting, demanding that the BDA implement a 50.50 split instead of the 60.40 model.
And they aren't just making up numbers. They have a very recent, highly relevant precedent to point to.
Yeah, the farmers cite the newer Badadi Integrated Township project. In that development, the state government negotiated with the landowners and ultimately agreed to a 50.50 split.
So the farmers in the Shivaram Karanth layout are looking at Badadi and asking a very logical constitutional question. Why are we being treated as second-class citizens? Why is our land only worth 40% while farmers just down the highway get 50%?
The BDA commissioner actually pushed back on that demand publicly. His argument was essentially that projects executed at different times under different market conditions cannot be legally compared.
Furthermore, the BDA points out that if you look at their older layouts from decades ago, farmers didn't receive any developed land component as compensation, just a meager cash payout.
So the BDA frames the 60.40 split as a generous modern concession. It is a very tense standoff.
But the ratio of the land you get back is, shockingly, not the most painful financial hurdle in this process. The true existential threat to the landowners is the betterment charge trap.
Oh, the betterment charges. This is where the economics of this layout go from unfair to arguably devastating for families simply trying to hold on to their existing homes.
Let's paint the scenario. Let's say you went to the Chandrasekhar Committee or the Bopaya Committee. They review your family home, the one you built back in 2012. They say, good news, your house is lawful. We will regularize it. We will not demolish your home.
You breathe a massive sigh of relief. You think you've survived the process.
But then the BDA sends you a bill in the mail.
The mechanism behind this bill, the betterment charge, is a fascinating piece of municipal logic, the BDA argues. We just invested billions of rupees building a massive modern urban layout entirely surrounding your house. We brought in paved roads, integrated sewage lines, and reliable electricity grids.
Because of our taxpayer-funded infrastructure, the market value of your private land just skyrocketed. Therefore, you legally owe the state money for the betterment or the unearned appreciation of your own property's value.
I have to pause and absorb the sheer audacity of that logic.
The BDA forces their layout onto your ancestral village against your will. They surround your quiet home with urban sprawl, driving up the paper value of your land money you haven't actually realized because you aren't selling the house, you just want to live in it.
And then they send you a bill for the privilege of being enveloped by their project.
Exactly. How much money are we actually talking about here?
The numbers are staggering, and what makes the local population so furious is the deeply unequal, almost arbitrary nature of how these charges are calculated.
Because the betterment charge is levied based on the change in government guidance values, the official baseline property rates before and after the layout's development.
But those guidance values vary wildly depending on which side of an invisible village boundary you sit on.
I want to hear the actual data from the sources. Break down the costs.
Let's look at Ramagan and Hali Village. The betterment charge there has been calculated at roughly 42 per square foot. So if you have a very standard, modest 30 by 40 foot family home, which is 1,200 square feet, you owe the BDA about $50,000 to keep it.
Okay, $50,000 is a painful, unexpected expense for a farmer, but a family could probably borrow that or pool their savings to pay it off.
Now step just a few meters across the revenue boundary into neighboring Soma Shetihali. The charge drastically shoots up to $465 per square foot.
Wait, what?
Yep. That exact same 30 by 40 house now costs over 5.5 lakhs to keep. And the financial terror peaks in the highest valuation areas of the layout, where the BDA is demanding an astonishing 1,028 per square foot.
Over 1,000 rupees a square foot. Let's do that math. A farmer with a modest 30 by 40 family home in a peak area suddenly owes the government over 12.3 lakhs just to avoid having their regularized house seized or demolished.
Yes.
That is not a municipal fee. That is an eviction notice executed by mathematics. How does a farmer who may have just watched their primary source of crop income get crushed by a bulldozer suddenly come up with 12 lakhs in liquid cash?
The tragic reality is that they often can't. They are forced into predatory loans, or worse, they are forced to sell their regularized home to private developers just to pay the tax debt, ultimately losing the land anyway.
This highlights a profound inequity built into the system. The original landowners are being squeezed for every rupee, while the BDA is systematically maximizing its own profits.
The sources highlight a specific grievance regarding those profits. The farmers have formally petitioned the government because they are not being allotted any of the highly valuable commercial sites or the premium corner plots.
Right. If you look at the layout map, the most valuable real estate sits at the intersections of the major 60-foot, 80-foot, and 100-foot wide arterial roads. These are the plots zoned for commercial complexes, petrol pumps, and high-density apartments.
If a farmer is handed a plot on a 100-foot road as part of their 9,500 square foot share, they could build a commercial complex and change their family's economic destiny for generations.
But the BDA is actively keeping those specific plots out of the farmer share pool.
Because the BDA's mandate is to recover the massive costs of building the layout. Therefore, they are strategically earmarking those premium corner and commercial sites for highly competitive public e-auctions to maximize government revenue.
The farmers who provided the underlying land are being relegated to the interior, purely residential plots.
While that feels incredibly unjust, we have to look at the market reality. Even those interior residential plots are incredibly valuable right now.
And this brings us to a major piece of strategic advice for our listener regarding the secondary real estate market. Despite the pain of the acquisition, your farmer share plots are a highly premium, intensely liquid asset.
They are arguably the most sought-after pieces of residential real estate in North Bengaluru right now.
The reason why is fascinating. The Supreme Court specifically ordered that the land losers, the farmers who surrendered their property, must be compensated with their developed plots first, before any sites are allotted to the general public through the BDA's massive lottery system.
That means right now, if you are holding your allotment letter for your 9,500 square feet of farmer share, you hold clear, legally unassailable titles to developed BDA plots.
The demand for those specific plots is astronomical. Private investors, wealthy families, and developers do not want to wait for the unpredictable BDA lottery.
They don't want to deal with the 1 in 1,000 odds of winning a public site. They are desperate to bypass the public system entirely, and the only way to do that is to buy the land directly from a farmer who already possesses a clear title.
The secondary market is blazing hot. But as a landowner receiving these plots, you have to be incredibly careful. Knowing that your financial entitlement on paper is worth crores is one thing, but you have to ensure the physical dirt they are handing you actually holds that value.
You have to vet the geography of your compensation, especially as the BDA rushes to finalize the civil works in 2026.
Let's assess the reality on the ground as of mid-2026. The BDA officially claims that 80% of the foundational civil work is complete.
Out of roughly 34,974 proposed plots across the entire project, over 30,000 have been physically formed. They have graded the roads, dug the drains, and laid the foundations.
And a major ruling from the High Court just came down in July 2026 that exposes the immense pressure the BDA is under. The BDA approached the court with a very candid admission. They're drowning in debt.
They borrowed heavily from commercial banks to pay the massive network of contractors building this layout. The estimated expenditure so far is a staggering 3,370 crore.
Wow.
The monthly interest payments on those loans alone are crushing the agency's finances.
So the High Court recognized the financial precipice the BDA was standing on and granted them a specific limited permission. The BDA is now legally allowed to officially invite applications from the general public for the 60% share of plots.
The allotment prices are reportedly set somewhere around 4,900 to 6,000 per square foot.
So if a normal citizen wants to buy a standard 30 by 40 public site through the lottery, it will cost them roughly 58.8 lakhs just for the base price before registration and taxes.
That is the revenue expectation. But there is a massive judicial catch attached to this permission.
Okay, what is it?
The court allowed the BDA to invite applications and, crucially, to collect the application fees and initial registration deposits from the public. But the court explicitly barred the BDA from actually allotting the sites or handing over possession to the public yet.
Wait, I need to make sure I'm interpreting this correctly. The BDA is taking applications from hundreds of thousands of hopeful citizens. They are collecting initial deposits, which, given how wildly oversubscribed BDA layouts get, will instantly run into the hundreds of crores of rupees in liquid cash.
Yeah, that's right.
But they aren't giving out the land yet. The public applications in July 2026 are essentially a massive state-sponsored crowdfunding effort just to generate the cash flow needed to pay the interest on the BDA's bank loans.
That is exactly how many financial and market analysts are interpreting the maneuver. It is a desperate measure to secure immediate liquidity.
And what that means for the listener is that the BDA is operating under extreme urgency. They are rushing.
And when massive bureaucracies rush, the finalization of the layout becomes incredibly fluid and mistakes are inevitable.
Which brings the focus sharply back to you, the farmer. If the BDA is in a panic to allocate 30,000 plots while drowning in order 3,370 crore of debt, you must protect yourself when they finally call you into the office to hand you your farmer share allotment letter.
You cannot just blindly accept the plot numbers printed on the page and assume the government did their due diligence. You have to scrutinize the geography of the dirt they are offering you.
Environmental regulations in Bengaluru had become draconian, and rightly so, following the severe urban flooding disasters in recent years. Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivakumar recently enforced a very strict, uncompromising rule regarding Rajakaluves.
Let's define Rajakaluves for anyone unfamiliar. These are the primary major stormwater drain networks that trace through the valleys and natural slopes of the region, designed to carry monsoon rains into the lakes.
So what is the new rule?
The government mandate is absolute. No permanent buildings, walls, or structures can be constructed within 50 feet of a Rajakaluve. Furthermore, the state has announced ambitious plans to build a 300-kilometer road network connecting the city's lakes, running alongside these drains, specifically to stop illegal encroachment and ensure unobstructed rainwater flow.
So put yourself in the shoes of a farmer. You have waited 18 years since the 2008 notification. You fought in the Supreme Court. You surrendered your lawsuit as part of the forced compromise, and the BDA finally offers you a 30 by 40 plot as compensation for your acquired ancestral land. If you just sign the paper without checking, what happens?
You must act like a deeply paranoid private buyer. If the BDA hands you a plot, and it turns out that specific patch of dirt sits inside that 50-foot Rajakaluve buffer zone, you have just been handed a dead asset.
It's practically worthless. If it's in the buffer zone, the BBMP will never approve a building sanction plan. You can't legally lay a foundation for a house, and because of that, no private investor in the secondary market will ever buy it from you.
You traded an acre of farmable land for a useless patch of urban grass.
It requires immense vigilance. You must physically overlay the BDA's layout sector map with the city's environmental buffer maps, and the stormwater drains are just one overlapping trap.
You also have to check the massive infrastructure alignments slated for North Bengaluru.
Right, the Peripheral Ring Road, the PRR. This is a massive multi-lane highway project designed to circle the outer edges of the city.
The Dr. Shivaram Karanth layout is a sprawling jigsaw puzzle divided into 9 massive sectors. The officially proposed alignment for the PRR literally cuts right through the vicinity, and in some plans directly intersects sectors of this layout.
So you could be allotted your hard-won compensation plot, only to find out it sits directly on the designated cut-through for a future multi-lane highway.
You just lose the land all over again to a different government agency.
Or worse, the sources note that the layout still contains pockets of unapproved private layouts, illegal developments created during the chaotic 2008-2018 window that are mixed within the government footprint and are still bogged down in complex litigation. You don't want a plot sitting in a litigation black hole.
And we cannot forget the aviation buffers. North Bengaluru is an aerospace hub. The layout sits adjacent to 2 highly active military installations, the Air Force Station in Yelahanka and the Air Force Station in Jalahali.
There are incredibly strict, federally enforced height restrictions and zoning laws near military flight paths.
If your allotted plot is situated in the direct flight path buffer, your ability to build vertically is severely capped. If you can only build 1 floor instead of 4, the commercial and resale value of your urban real estate plummets.
This is bureaucratic minefield. You surrender an acre of clean, uncomplicated agricultural land, and you have to navigate a gauntlet of stormwater drains, highway alignments, military bases, and unresolved private litigation just to ensure your legally mandated compensation is actually worth the paper it is printed on.
You cannot trust the BDA to do this due diligence for you. Their priority is paying the interest on a 3,300 crore loan. You have to verify the sector, the specific survey number, the environmental status, and the infrastructure overlaps of your specific allotment before you sign any acceptance papers.
So, what does this massive web of information mean for you today? Let's recap the essential survival guide for navigating the Shivaram Karanth layout. First, if you have an existing structure built before August 2018, you must approach the Bopaya Committee formally and ensure your municipal paperwork is flawless.
Second, you must be mentally prepared to make that painful legal plea deal. You have to unconditionally withdraw your conflicting litigation challenging the acquisition if you want to get your alternative plot or secure your regularization certificate.
Third, you must meticulously scrutinize the betterment charges levied against your retained homes. If you're in a village being charged $1,000 a square foot, while the village across the street pays $45, you need to legally challenge that calculation and demand transparency on how the guidance value was applied to your specific survey number.
And fourth, once you finally secure your farmer's share allotment, you must treat it as a highly premium, intensely liquid asset in the 2026 resale market.
But you can only cash in on that value after you have personally verified every single inch of that dirt against Rogalove buffers, PRR road alignments, and Air Force height restrictions.
What we are describing is a forced radical transition. You are shifting from being a traditional farmer who intimately works the soil to an urban real estate manager who must audit the land's legal constraints.
The skill sets are entirely different, but adapting to this new reality is the only way your family survives this process intact. And that profound transition leaves us with one final, broader concept to ponder.
The Supreme Court mandated that land losers get their developed plots first. While the struggle to get here has been immense, the protests, the arrests, demolished crops, the loss of grazing lands, this specific policy of handing back 40% as developed urban plots is going to trigger a massive socioeconomic shift.
It transforms traditional rural agrarian families into instant urban real estate stakeholders overnight.
In many cases, families who previously dealt in the seasonal economics of crop yields are suddenly holding highly liquid premium assets worth multiple crores of rupees.
The real question for the future is not just how you will get your land back today, but how this sudden massive injection of premium urban real estate wealth will completely alter the culture, the power dynamics, and the very future of these 17 historic agrarian villages.
Will the original farmers leverage these developed plots to become the new generation of wealthy urban landlords in North Bengaluru, building commercial complexes and dominating the local economy?
Or will the crushing weight of 12 lakh betterment charges, combined with the sheer exhaustion of an 18-year legal battle, force them to sell their premium assets to outside developers for quick cash, eventually taking that money and leaving the land of their ancestors forever?
It is the ultimate paradox of rapid urban expansion. The massive layout that displaced them might be the very mechanism that makes them wealthy beyond their imagination, or it might be the very thing that quietly erases their community from the map entirely.
We started this deep dive by talking about how property rights in urban development are murky. The history of the Dr. Shivaram Karanth layout is a blur of conflicting laws, illegal NOCs, erased protections, and state-mandated compromises.
Your job now isn't to look for a perfect, clean resolution. Your job is to navigate the murky waters, use the committees to your advantage, obsessively verify the buffers, and ensure that when the dust of the bulldozers finally settles in 2026, you are the one holding the clear, unassailable deed.
Thank you for joining this deep dive. Stay vigilant out there.